Chapter 11:22. Bang! When the depressing roar that made one's heart contract and eardrums tremble reverberated from one of the passageways of Heavenly Wolf Island, the entire ground of Heavenly Wolf Island trembled for a brief moment. Within the passageway, in the vast open space above, a powerful impact mixed with violent lightning swept across the entire space like a storm spreading in all directions. Kacha! Kacha, kacha, kacha! Without any suspense, the ground cracked open again and again. Bang, 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 bang. Under the attack of the substantial impact storm and terrifying lightning, the rocks that were closer to the impact site exploded one after another like fragile rubber balls. Even Wendy could not help but scream. She raised her hand to block in front of her. It was as if she was going against the flow in a storm and would be blown away at any time. If it was not for the fact that she was some distance away from the center of the impact, her petite figure would have been blown away. In such a situation, the entire open space at the center of the impact seemed to have collapsed and caved in extremely cleanly. As a result, the entire ground began to tremble crazily. Bolts of lightning were like pythons as they slithered back and forth on the ground. Wherever they passed, the ground would crack open. Not long after, along the center of the impact, the entire ground was covered with cracks and electric currents that moved back and forth like a spider web. By the time everything calmed down, it was unknown how much time had passed before it happened. Feeling that the movement had gradually calmed down, Wendy raised her head with lingering fear and looked forward. Paw! 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 Gravel rolled back and forth on the ground that was full of cracks and electric currents, making crisp sounds. A burst of thick sand and dust filled the space. In the thick sand and dust, two figures stood facing each other from afar. One of them was still standing tall and straight, his robe fluttering under the impact of the impact waves. He was not injured at all. The other was slightly bent over, his face covered with sweat, and he was constantly gasping for breath. One of his hands hung down weakly, and he seemed to be in a sorry state. The former was Noah. The latter was naturally Laxus. One of them had an expression as calm as an ancient well, and his posture was as calm as the wind and clouds, as if everything was normal. One of them was sweating profusely and panting heavily, cutting a sorry figure. It was clear at a glance who was strong and who was weak. However, Wendy noticed it. Although Noah was unscathed, one of his sleeves seemed to have been burned away, and his entire body was gone. Laxus's limp hand trembled. Drops of blood dripped from the tip of his fist, dyeing a small piece of the ground red. Noah's missing hand and Laxus's trembling and bleeding hand were both the hands that had launched the attack in the previous shocking collision. Clearly, the final result was still Noah's victory. "You've really grown into a monster." Staring at Noah in front of him, Laxus seemed to have given up on something. He relaxed his body and smiled weakly. "You didn't even use magic to block my strongest attack, and you didn't even get hurt." "That's not right, Laxus." Noah shook his head. "At the last moment, I used magic to strengthen my body. Otherwise, the result wouldn't be like this." "Is that so?" Only then did Laxus's expression soften. He calmed his breathing and turned his gaze to Noah. "But, in the battle just now, you didn't use your full strength, right?" Noah was silent. This was equivalent to admitting it. "Really?" Laxus closed his eyes and smacked his lips. "Losing to a younger brother, there's nothing more embarrassing than this." After saying this, Laxus turned around and picked up the coat that he threw on the ground. After putting it on, he slowly left. This action was undoubtedly Laxus admitting his defeat. In fact, although Laxus could continue to stand there, his magical power was almost depleted. Even if they continued to fight, the outcome of the battle would only be decided in a short moment, right? Since that was the case, he might as well just admit defeat. This was the current Laxus. If it was the previous Laxus, he definitely wouldn't be so straightforward. This man who was full of obsession could finally be so magnanimous like today. Looking at Laxus's back gradually moving away, Noah couldn't help but speak. Are you planning to go back? Rax's footsteps paused slightly. Then, he returned to his original state as if nothing had happened. With his back facing Noah, he raised a hand. I'll see you in the end. After finishing his words, Laxus disappeared at the end of the tunnel. Watching Laxus leave, Noah's face couldn't help but reveal a smile. You've already lost, yet you're still acting cool. You're really not honest. Big brother Noah. Wendy ran towards Noah's direction, and when she ran to Noah, she was so excited that she started dancing. Big brother Noah. You passed. Yes. Noah patted Wendy's head. Wendy also stayed here and watched until the end. You're really amazing. No such thing. Wendy was a little embarrassed. I didn't help at all. Facing that Laxus, there aren't many people who can say that they can help. Noah chuckled. Sooner or later, Wendy will become stronger. Wendy nodded heavily, and in her heart, she gradually began to think about becoming stronger. At this moment, the entire ground suddenly trembled for no reason. Wendy exclaimed in surprise. What? What's wrong? Noah frowned and looked in a direction. As far as Noah's eyes could see, he could only see the walls of the tunnel. However, Noah sensed an extremely shocking mana rising in that direction. This magic power. After feeling the aura of the magic power, Noah exclaimed in surprise. Kill this. Kill this. Chapter 11:23. When Noah walked out of the passage, there were already 3 teams present. Elfman and Lasana's team. Julian and Leby's team. And Karna and Lucy's team. All 3 groups smiled at Noah, who had just walked out of the passage. Sure enough, it's impossible for Noah to fail. Lucy said to Noah with a smile. I thought Noah met Miss Mira and deliberately admitted defeat. Yo, Noah. Leby also waved at Noah with a smile on her face. We also passed. You're a man. Elfman gave Noah a thumbs up. Men should pass the first stage of the experiment. As for Julian and Karna, although they didn't greet Noah, it was obvious that they were very happy about passing the first stage of the experiment. The joy on their faces couldn't be hidden. Everyone. Wendy said in surprise. Has everyone passed? Not to mention Wendy, even Noah was more or less surprised. Regardless of which team won the final victory, among the 3 teams that passed the first stage of the experiment, 2 of them must have met an active S-rank archmage. And since they were already here, it meant that 2 of the 3 teams had broken through the obstacles of the S-rank magic shooters to pass the first stage of the experiment. Which 2 teams had the ability to break through the S-rank archmage's garrison? Noah, who was extremely curious, asked directly. What kind of passage did you choose? What kind of opponents did you meet? Hearing this, the team members who passed the first stage looked at each other and smiled. Then, the next report made Noah surprised again. We chose the passage of the chaotic battle. Lucy made a victory gesture to Noah. Along with us are Gadjalu and Lily's teams, as well as Gray and Freed's teams. Wendy couldn't help but cover her mouth. In other words, Sister Lucy and Sister Kana had to defeat those 2 teams to clear the level. Rather than saying that we defeated them, it's better to say that we picked up a bargain. Karna laughed bitterly. Because we were the last to arrive at Celestial Wolf Island, the other passages had already been chosen. When we walked into the only remaining passage and arrived at the chaotic battlefield, the impatient Gray and Gadjalu started fighting first. In the end, Gray, Gadjalu, Freed, and Lily were all beaten black and blue, and even their mana was exhausted. Lucy laughed dryly. So, we picked up a little bargain. I see. Noah laughed, and then looked at Lysana and Elfman. Then, you met an active S-rank archmage Garrison. It's not just an active S-rank archmage, Karna said helplessly. We're met Sister Mira. Mira. Noah was slightly stunned, and then he was surprised. In other words, you defeated Mira before coming here. Looking at Noah's surprised expression, Lysana and Elfman exchanged glances. Back to 30 minutes ago. When Noah flew directly to Celestial Wolf Island with Wendy and chose a path, the others also arrived at Celestial Wolf Island one after another after a commotion and began to choose a path. In addition to Noah and Wendy, Naz and Gadjalu, who teamed up with Habi and Lily respectively, also took advantage of the convenience of moving and arrived at Celestial Wolf Island first. After Naz and Gadjalu's teams, Julian and Leby's teams, and Gray and Freed's teams also landed on the island respectively. Lysana and Elfman arrived at Celestial Wolf Island one step ahead of Lucy and Karna, and chose one of the two remaining routes. However, the enemies waiting in front of the siblings made Lysana and Elfman experience what it meant to be shocked. Whoosh! A ferocious scaled tail that looked like a crocodile swayed in the air with a whistling sound. I didn't expect that the ones who chose the route I was stationed to be the two of you, Lysana, Elfman. The owner of the ferocious scaled tail let out a clear and melodious voice as usual. That voice was already very familiar to Lysana and Elfman. But it was precisely because of this familiarity that Lysana and Elfman could tell that this voice was different from before. What was the difference? The difference was that this voice, which had always been sweet and gentle in the past, now carried the ferocious aura of a ferocious beast. Under this ferocious voice, even Lysana and Elfman couldn't help but take a step back. Almost at the same time, the voice filled with ferocious aura sounded again. You can't back off here. Otherwise, I won't let you, who can't even get past me, continue forward. Along with this sentence, the owner of the ferocious scaled tail took a step forward and exposed her entire body to the sunlight. What kind of figure was that? If one had to use a word to describe it, then there was only one word. Nightmare. Her slim and graceful body was covered only by a tight-fitting swimsuit. Her waist-length hair, which used to hang down like silver silk, shot up into the sky in anger. Her pair of arms had turned into the fins of a demon's wrist. Myra's gentle and delicate face was not only filled with ferociousness at this moment, but her ears were also long and pulled back like a bat's. Coupled with the ferocious scaled tail that swayed up and down on her back, how could such an appearance not be described as a nightmare? And to the enemy, Myra's appearance was indeed a nightmare. That was because it was the power of the devil that Mira had absorbed through her self-awakening, received magic, since she was young. It was called Satan's soul. It was only in this form that Mira was in existence like in the legends. Mira, Jean Strauss, was a demon kin that was on par with the fairy queen. Even if you're my younger brother or sister, I won't show any mercy. As she slowly walked forward, Mira, who had received Satan's soul and transformed into a demon kin, looked at Lysana and Elfman with a pair of sharp eyes. Her voice was so low that it sounded like it came from the depths of hell. So, use all your strength. At this moment, a pitch-black aura of death rose from Myra's body like a fog, causing the air to seem as though it had decayed and become lifeless. Lysana and Elfman felt suffocated at the same time. That was because both Lysana and Elfman were able to tell. Mira was definitely serious. Sister. Elfman clenched his fists and stared at Mira, sweat dripping from his forehead. It was obvious that Elfman couldn't muster up the will to resist. Lysana, on the other hand, took a deep breath and suddenly took a step forward. Her action caused Myra's footsteps to falter slightly. She looked over and the corner of her mouth lifted. Lysana, do you really think you can defeat me? In her Satan's soul form, Myra's smile was hair-raising. However, in the face of Myra's terrifying smile, Lisanna smiled sweetly and spoke without hesitation. "That's right, Sister Mira. I will defeat you." "Oh." Mira smiled disdainfully. "Do you think you can do it? If it's my own strength, I naturally won't be able to do it." Lisanna smiled confidently. "But, Sister Mira, it's a pity that I have a fiancé who really dotes on me." Mila raised her eyebrows slightly at his words. "Aw. Sister Mira, don't you know?" Lisanna blinked at Mira. "In order to not let me be in danger, Big Brother Noah helped me make a lot of insurance." Sister Mira doesn't seem to know about this. "It seems that Big Brother Noah really does love me more." The smile on Myra's face became twitching. What happened next was logical. Mira, who had been guarding against Lisanna's unknown methods and neglected Elfman, was hit by this man's anger and carelessly lost. Chapter 11:24. After learning about how Lisanna and Elfman defeated Mira, Noah was completely speechless. He didn't think that Lisanna would be so good at taking advantage of loopholes. Although Mira no longer continued to be active in the magic world as a magic shooter recently and lived a rather comfortable life, even if her skills were rusty because of this, the foundation of an S-rank magic shooter was still there, after all, and would not disappear just like that. With Lisanna and Elfman's strength, even if they worked together, it would be difficult for them to deal an effective blow to Mira, let alone defeat her. The problem was that Lisanna had used Noah's matter to sway Mira. With Noah's position in Myra's heart, as well as Noah's fiancé, Lisanna's provocation, the real reason for Myra's defeat was probably not the means that Noah had secretly prepared for Lisanna, but also the lethality of "Brother Noah loves me more." After all, they were both Noah's fiancés. Noah had made a lot of preparation so that Lisanna wouldn't be in danger. On the other hand, not only was Mira not prepared at all, she didn't even know about this matter. With such a difference in treatment, it was already very good that Mira didn't cry. It was inevitable that she would be shaken. Her skills were rusty because she hadn't fought in a long time. She was too guarded against Lisanna's unknown means and neglected Elfman's role. Her heart was shaken. These three reasons combined caused Mira, an active S-rank sorcerer, to reveal too many flaws and be taken down by Lisanna and Elfman. Of course, there was another reason. That was, Myra Satan's soul wasn't a power that could be used as and when she wanted to. The so-called receiving magic was actually a magic that could absorb the power of animals, monsters, and even magical creatures into one's own body for one's own use. In the magic world, there were many sorcerers who knew how to use receive spell. Even Lisanna and Elfman knew how to use receive spell. It was easy to imagine how versatile this spell was. However, apart from Mira, no one could receive the power of a demon. Naturally, this kind of power wasn't something that could be used as and when one wanted to. One weakness that couldn't be bypassed was that the mana consumption was too great. In that case, it was bound to lead to a problem. Myra's explosive power was very strong, even stronger than Alusha's and comparable to Laxus's. However, she couldn't last long in battle. Once he was dragged into a war of attrition, it would undoubtedly be the worst for Mira. In the end, after being intimidated by Lisanna and then provoked, Mira, who had grown fearful and shaken, was firmly held back by Lisanna. Then, Elfman seized the opportunity and took down Mira in one fell swoop. This was the reason why Mira lost. Not only Noah, but even the rest of the people could more or less see the reason behind it. For a moment, they were speechless. Wait. Only then did Noah react. He stared blankly at her. Since when did I hide from Mira and prepare for you to guard against danger? Like Mira, she was no longer active in the magic world as a sorcerer. Instead, she was a full-time assistant and waitress in the guild. Her life was very comfortable. How could there be any danger in such a life? Moreover, before returning to this world, Noah really didn't have many tricks up his sleeve. Naturally, he didn't prepare anything for Lisanna to guard against danger. If he did, Noah definitely wouldn't treat Mira differently and neglect her. This was the only thing that Noah was absolutely certain of. Noah loved Mira and Lisanna equally. There was never a saying of who he loved more. She should know this better than anyone else, right? Thus, she smiled slyly. Of course I'm lying to big sister Mira. If big brother Noah really prepared such an important thing for me, how could I not tell big sister Mira immediately? Hearing this, the corners of Noah's eyes began to twitch. Oh. Lucy laughed out loud. Noah, you're in trouble this time. Not to mention Lucy, even Lebby, Kana, and even Julian were snickering. Wasn't that right? Undoubtedly, there was no difference in treatment. Now that Lisanna had cheated him, Noah could already imagine how aggrieved Mira would be when they met again. Noah really didn't feel good. When Noah's expression darkened, Wendy hurriedly changed the topic as if to smooth things over. Then, which S-rank sorcerer did Big Sister Ruby and Big Sister Julian meet this time? Hearing this, Lebby and Julian seemed to recall the terrifying opponent they had encountered in the first phase of the experiment. Their faces darkened, and even turned green. However, at the same time, a look of relief appeared on their faces. Time once again returned to 30 minutes ago. Lisanna and Elfman were the second-last team to arrive at Celestial Wolf Island. As for Lebby and Julian, they were the fourth group to arrive at Heavenly Wolf Island after Noah and Wendy, Naz and Habby, and Gadjaloo and Lily. However, Lebby and Julian, who had chosen the route before Lisanna and Elfman, were much slower than Lisanna and Elfman's team. The reason was naturally because they met the most merciless obstacle. Boom! Accompanied by the sound of an explosion, a shocking shock wave suddenly spread out in all directions in the vast tunnel. Ah! Under the shocking impact, Lebby and Julian were both sent flying. Like kites with their strings cut, they smashed into the walls on both sides of the tunnel. Then, they slowly slid down, their faces contorted in pain. It's a lie, right? Julian, who was lying on the ground, muttered in disbelief. Julian. He didn't even have the strength to fight back. Once upon a time, Julian was also an S-rank sorcerer in Phantom Lord. Although every guild's S-rank sorcerer had a different level of strength due to the difficulty of promotion, the Phantom Lord was once the #1 guild in the Kingdom of Fiore alongside Fairy Tail. Even if the promotion difficulty of the S-rank sorcerer in the guild was lower than that of Fairy Tail, it wouldn't be much lower. At the very least, that was what Julian thought. That was why Julian, who had once been an S-rank high mage in another guild, thought that even if he wasn't a match for an active S-rank high mage, he would at least be able to put up a fight. Now, this idea was completely destroyed by the Queen of the Fairies. What's wrong? With an awe-inspiring voice, Elusa walked out of the shadows in front of him with heavy footsteps of her steel boots hitting the ground. Is it over just like that? Both Lebby and Julian raised their heads with difficulty and looked forward. At that moment, Elusa was wearing a set of armor. It was a set of green armor with fins, just like a mermaid's. The ears had also turned into fins. Wearing this set of armor, Elusa held a light green sword in her hand and had a stern expression on her face. If you can't even handle this, then don't even think about becoming an S-rank sorcerer. Hearing this, Julian bit his lips and forced himself to stand up, still in pain. Wait, Julian. Julian. Levi also struggled to stand up, but she still tried to persuade him. That's the Sea King's armor, which can increase your resistance to water magic and nullify water magic attacks. If you use water magic, even if you force yourself to attack, you won't be able to defeat Elusa. Then what should we do? Julian helplessly asked Lebby for help. Julibian only knows water elemental magic. Lebby was also at her wit's end. But inadvertently, Lebby touched a red string in front of her. She paused for a moment, then an idea flashed through her mind. Aren't you going to continue attacking? Alusha's merciless whipping was getting closer and closer. If that's the case, then I'll do it. Just as Alusha was about to rush forward, Lebby suddenly shouted, "Hey! I have something very important to tell you." Chapter 11:25. I have something very important to tell you. When these words came out of Leia's mouth, Alyssa, who was about to charge forward, abruptly came to a halt. However, Alusha's delicate face did not show any signs of surprise. Instead, it was rather calm. I see. You know that your opponent can't face you head-on, so you're starting to use a strategy. While saying that, Alyssa didn't seem to be worried at all about what strategy Layla would use. Instead, she seemed to be looking forward to it and smiled confidently. Alright, Leia, let me see what strategy you're going to use. Leia was rather helpless when she saw that Alusha had seen through her plan with just a few words. At this juncture, she suddenly claimed that she had something important to say. Other than using a strategy, what else could it be? Alusha was the type of person who was especially smart. Therefore, it was a piece of cake for Alusha to see through her plan. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible to use a strategy that could shake Alusha. However, just because it was close to impossible didn't mean it was absolutely impossible. Leia, who was enduring the pain in her body, gripped the red string around her neck tightly as a smile appeared on her slightly childish face. Hey, Alusha, if someone suddenly proposes to you, what do you plan to do? The entire place fell silent. Propose? Alusha was stunned. Propose? Julian was also stunned. When they finally reacted, the two girls' pretty faces were filled with excitement. Propose, propose. The sternness on Alusha's face disappeared in an instant. It was as if she had turned into the most ordinary girl. She took 2 steps back and looked at Leia as she stuttered. That means, he wants me to get married. That's right. Leia made a victory sign in her heart and quickly said. And I'm saying if someone wants to marry you, what do you plan to do? Will you agree? Wait. Alusha quickly raised a hand to stop Leia from speaking. She forced herself to appear calm, but her slightly stiff expression had already betrayed Alusha's inner thoughts. Why would you suddenly ask such a question? That's the important thing I want to tell you, Lebby sighed as if she was having a hard time thinking about what to say. Actually, Alusha, in our guild, there has always been someone who wants to marry all the girls. Levi's sudden and shocking words left Alyssa completely dumbfounded. You? What did you say? Alusha said in shock. You're saying that someone in the guild wants to marry all the girls? Even Alusha, who had no immunity to the word marriage, was suspicious of such a ridiculous statement. However, in the face of Alusha's suspicion, Lebby acted as if she knew what was going on. It's true, I'm not lying to you. Leia said with a serious face as if she was trying to trick a child. Think about it carefully, Alusha. Isn't there such a winner in our guild? Alusha was taken aback by Lebby's words. Then, she finally understood what Lebby meant and spoke in a tone full of uncertainty. You mean Noah? After saying that, Alusha did not give Leia a chance to reply. Impossible. Noah isn't that kind of person. How do you know that Noah isn't that kind of person? Lebby bowed deeply to Noah in her heart and apologized. Then, she said with some indignation in her voice. If Noah isn't that kind of person, why would he be engaged to both Mira and Lisanna at the same time? That's because Mira and Lisanna are both in love with Noah. Noah also responded to their feelings. That's the result. Alusha said righteously. I'm sure that Noah is absolutely sincere to Mira and Lisanna. We grew up together, and I can see that. Leia, I won't allow you to slander your companions like that. Indeed, both Mira and Lisanna are in love with Noah. I don't suspect that Noah's feelings for Mira and Lisanna are fake, Leia said. But, if Noah can like both Mira and Lisanna at the same time, it's not impossible for him to like the other girls in the guild, right? That's true. Alusha frowned. But, ever since he got engaged to Mira and Lisanna, Noah hasn't shown any signs of being a playboy. That's where you're wrong, Alusha. Lebby's expression suddenly turned sad and distressed. It was as if she wouldn't give up until she said something shocking. Actually, not only did Noah propose to Mira and Lisanna, he also secretly proposed to me. Wah. Alusha's expression froze. Not to mention Alusha, even Julian's eyes widened as he stared at Lebby in disbelief, causing Lebby's face to turn red. Of course, this time, she was blushing for real. I know you don't believe me. She suppressed her shyness and pretended to be indignant as she spoke to Alusa. If you don't believe me, take a look at this. She then took out the red string that was hanging around her neck. Upon closer inspection, there was a small pouch that looked like an amulet tied to the red string. Leia opened the pouch and took something out. The next moment, both Alusha and Julian were stunned. This was because the thing that Ruby took out from the bag was a small diamond. Alusha, you must have seen the diamond ring that Noah used to propose to Mira and Lisanna, right? Leia opened her palm and looked at Alusha. She then looked at Alusha. Look, isn't the diamond on Mira and Lisanna's rings exactly the same as this one? Exactly the same. Of course, it was exactly the same. Back then, when Noah ordered the 2 rings, there was a small portion of the diamond left behind. Leia had secretly taken it away and put it into a pouch that looked like an amulet. She then tied it with a red string and wore it like a necklace. Now, the diamond that Lebby took out was the small part of the diamond that she had secretly hidden back then. This is what Noah used to propose to me. When she said this, Lebby's pretty face was also completely red. This. Chapter 11:26. When he recalled the process of defeating Alusha, Julian smiled sheepishly, while Rebby's face turned slightly red. She couldn't help but secretly grip the amulet hidden in her clothes. Although it was a strategy that she had no other choice, it was a fact that Rebby secretly hid the diamond left over from Noah's custom-made ring. Initially, Rebby only treated the diamond as an amulet, which was why she always wore it on her body. Now that Alusha knew about this matter, even if Alusha knew that Rebby's lie was only a temporary measure, the fact that Rebby secretly hid the diamond left over from Noah's custom-made ring was inevitably exposed. Unfortunately, only Rebby and the jewelry store owner knew that the diamond was left over from Noah's custom-made ring. Even Noah himself didn't know about this. What should I do if Alusha really misunderstands? With that thought, Rebby secretly clenched her fists. No, I must find Alusha and have a good chat afterwards. Find Alusha and have a chat. Noah cast a puzzled gaze at Rebby. What do you want to talk about? And nothing. Rebby, who was stared at by Noah, blushed again. Her heartbeat quickened slightly, and she hurriedly stopped her delusions and changed the topic. Why yes, we're the only 4 groups that passed the first stage of the experiment, right? Gray and Gadula's teams have been defeated by us. Lucy spoke in high spirits as if she had really defeated Gray and Gadula herself. Only Naz's team is left. Naz? Lisanna tapped her cheek with a finger and tilted her head. Brother Noah and Wendy met Lax's, Brother Elfie, and I met Sister Mira, Rebby and Julian met Alusha, and Lucy and Kana met the 3 groups. Then, the S-rank sorcerer guarding the remaining passage, she didn't finish her sentence. Because everyone thought of it. Naz met Kildas, right? Kana's expression was slightly complicated, but more than that, it was pity for Naz. What bad luck. Admittedly, Naz's strength was one of the best in fairy tale, but Kilda's was the strongest sorcerer in the guild. Even Alusha could defeat Naz in one hit, let alone Kilda's, who was far stronger than Alusha. Is that so? Lucy said with some pity. Grey was eliminated, will Naz be eliminated too? Just as everyone was thinking about this, Noah suddenly had a thought and smiled. That's not necessarily true. Everyone present was stunned. Under everyone's gaze, Noah turned his head and looked at the exit of the remaining passage. Everyone followed Noah's gaze and looked over. In the next second, a figure slowly walked out from the inside of the passage, and there was a cat with open wings floating in the air beside him. Who else could it be but Naz and Habi? Naz actually passed Kilda's test. If it was a normal situation, everyone would be shocked. However, at this very moment, no one present had the energy to be shocked. It was because Naz, who had walked out of the passage, was not as noisy and carefree as before. Instead, he lowered his head and hid his expression under the shadows. He looked extremely depressed, which was very abnormal. It was this extremely abnormal scene that caused everyone to be unable to care about being shocked. Habi. Lucy looked at Habi in bewilderment. What happened? Habi didn't speak. He just spread his hands helplessly with a helpless look, which made everyone look at each other. Only Noah more or less guessed the reason why Naz had such an abnormal performance. After defeating Raxus, whether it was Noah or Wendy, they both felt that Raxus had burst out with an extremely shocking amount of magic power. Even Noah and Wendy, who were so far away, felt it, not to mention Naz, who was close to Kilda's in the passage. Most likely, the competitive Naz must have felt the despairing difference in strength from Kilda's, which was why he fell into a depressed state. After all, if Naz really defeated Kilda's, with Naz's character, he would definitely make a fuss. With such a depressed look now, no one would think that Naz really relied on his strength to defeat Kilda's to pass the first stage of the experiment. So, it must be that Kilda's recognized Naz and took the initiative to let him pass, right? And obviously, Naz didn't seem to be able to accept such a result. At that moment, everyone looked at Naz, who lowered his head and fell into depression, and they didn't know what to say for a while. However, Naz's footsteps didn't stop, but he walked straight in the direction of Noah. Noah looked straight at Naz, didn't speak, didn't make any expression, and remained silent. Under such circumstances, Naz came in front of Noah, and immediately raised his head to meet Noah's gaze. His eyes were filled with an unprecedented strong will. Hey, Noah. Naz slowly spat out such a sentence. I will definitely become stronger, stronger. I know. Noah looked into Naz's eyes and nodded. I also believe that you can definitely do it. Is that so? The smile on Naz's face returned little by little. At that time, will you fight with me? Hearing this, Noah smiled indifferently. I can accompany you at any time. The strong will in Naz's eyes was immediately replaced by satisfaction. Good. Naz pointed to everyone present and made a declaration. Who can become an S-rank magic shooter? Let's fight it out. That declaration was as competitive as ever. However, everyone could clearly feel that in that competitive speech, there was a strong will that had never been there before. As a result, everyone was also ignited by Naz's words. I won't lose. Kana's face was also full of determination. Definitely become an S-rank magic shooter. N. Lucy nodded in agreement. I will definitely make Kana become an S-rank magic shooter. Zhu Bian won't lose either. Zhu Bian, who didn't have any desire to fight before, was also excited. Zhu Bian will definitely work hard. Come on. Julian. Levi clenched her small fists. We will definitely win in the end. Man. Elfman shouted. The one who wins in the end is a real man. Although I'm very supportive of Brother Noah, I won't admit defeat so easily. Lisanna smiled sweetly. At least, except for Big Brother Noah, I will definitely not lose to anyone. I will work hard too. Wendy quickly expressed her opinion. I will definitely work hard to help Big Brother Noah. Noah didn't say anything. He just patted Wendy's head and looked at Naz. Although the smile on his face wasn't very confident, it revealed a strong courage. Hee hee. Naz grinned and laughed. Very good, I'm burning. Love. Hubby was so excited that he flew around in the air. Looking at the scene that was completely ignited by Naz's will, Noah's heart was filled with all kinds of emotions. Such charisma, as expected of a dragon's child. At this moment, another voice suddenly cut in. It's best if you can have confidence. Hearing this voice, everyone turned their heads and looked at the source of the voice. There, Makarov walked over step by step, looked around at everyone, and nodded. There are actually so many teams that passed the first stage of the experiment. Wasn't that right? 7 routes, 3 of them would intersect and only one team could be determined. The other 4 routes were all guarded by S-rank magic shooters. If something went wrong, it could really lead to only one team being able to pass the first stage of the experiment. Now, all 4 S-rank magic shooters had been broken through. Even if the rest didn't break through directly except for Noah, it was still surprising. Then, let's begin the second stage of the experiment. Makarov directly announced. Next, you must find the mausoleum of the first president, Mavis Viamilio. The time limit is 6 hours. If you don't reach the destination in 6 hours, the team will be eliminated. Understood? Yes. Everyone nodded in response. Chapter 11:27. In one of the corners of Celestial Wolf Island, there was a temporary camp. It was made up of several tents, and it looked like a campsite used for camping. At this time, in one of the tents in the camp, Gray, Gadjaloo, Freed, and Lily were lying on top of it. They had bruises all over their bodies, and they were rubbing them while groaning in pain. It hurts. Gray rubbed his almost disfigured face and looked at Gadjaloo with a ferocious gaze. You bastard, aren't you being too heavy-handed? What does it have to do with me? Gadjaloo said with his nose in the air. You're too weak. I didn't even have time to use my strength. What did you say? Gray was furious. Just as he was about to get up, he lay down again because he pulled his wound. Hee hee. Gadjaloo just wanted to mock him, but he also pulled his wound, causing him to howl in pain. Looking at Gray and Gadjaloo, who still insisted on quarreling even in their injured state, Freed and Lily, who were also lying on the side, were quite speechless. But there was nothing they could do about it. The gap in strength between these 4 people was not very big. If they were to fight, it would only end in a situation where both sides would suffer great losses. Of course, if there was a winner, then presumably, even if they were seriously injured, Gray and Gadjaloo wouldn't be so hot-tempered, right? The problem was that not only did the team of Gray and Gadjaloo not have a winner, but Lucy and Kana also took advantage of the situation and eliminated both Gray and Gadjaloo. That was the reason why these 2 people were so noisy. Like Gray and Gadjaloo, Freed and Lily were also injured in the fight, and now they were lying here. But compared to Gray and Gadjaloo, who were making a ruckus after being picked up, Freed and Lily weren't that unwilling. If one had to say what kind of emotion he would have after this result, it would only be regret. I already knew beforehand that there would be people from Group 3 joining the chaotic battle. In the end, I still made the mistake of being a fisherman benefiting from the fight between the sandpiper and the clam, Freed sighed. How embarrassing. There's nothing we can do about it. Lily's injuries were the lightest, and he was also the most open-minded. After all, we are just partners of Gadjaloo and Gray. Our main responsibility is to support them. Since they want to fight, we can only accompany them. In fact, it was the two impatient people, Gray and Gadjaloo, who couldn't wait to fight when they encountered each other in the passage. Even Fred and Lily could only participate in the battle. They fought until both sides were injured. In the end, it led to Lucy and Connor taking advantage of the situation. If Gray and Gadjaloo could obediently wait for Connor and Lucy to appear, the result would definitely not be like this. It's too late to say anything now. Since it has already happened, there's nothing we can do about it. Fried seemed to have gotten over it, but then he frowned again and looked in a direction. But what's going on with them? Hearing this, Lily also looked over, and then revealed a look of confusion. He saw that at a wooden table outside the tent, Alusha and Mira were sitting there with their heads lowered, falling into a state of extreme depression. Alusha's expression alternated between green and red. I didn't expect that I would actually fall for such an obvious trick, but there's nothing I can do about it. It's a sacred marriage. Besides, it's not like I haven't thought about getting married, not to mention that the other party is Noah. Obviously, Alusha's expression turned green because she regretted it, and her expression turned red because she was still immersed in the delusion of marriage. As for Mira, not only was she completely depressed, but she also seemed to be unwilling to believe the truth as she kept muttering. Noah really does love Lisanna a little more, a little more, a little more. It seemed that those words had really ruthlessly stabbed Myra's heart, causing her to bleed non-stop. Just like that, the two strongest female sorcerers in the Fiori Kingdom's #1 guild, Fairy Tale, were completely immersed in their own world, and their backs were dim. Seeing this scene, Fried and Lily could only look at each other. After a while, Lily lamented. There are indeed many weirdos in this guild. You can't say that, Fried said in a serious tone. Maybe Alusha and Mira really have something on their minds, and as companions, we should go and care for them. Is that so? Lily frowned. But my intuition tells me that it's better not to get close to Alusha and Mira now. Just as he finished speaking, a voice of agreement sounded. I feel the same. The one who said this was Bikesro, who had just picked some wild vegetables from the forest. Alusha and Mira are very dangerous right now, and I don't want my babies to be hurt. The marionettes floating around Bikesro began to jump up and down. Anyway, just don't bother with them. Abigrin also walked out of the forest with a bunch of wild fruits in her hands. She looked like she had nothing to do with this matter. It's not like you don't know what those two women are like when they're angry. Oh. You're back. Fred propped himself up and looked around. Then, he asked in confusion. Where's Laxus? Bikesro, Abiglin, and Bikesro glanced at each other, and their expressions turned solemn. Actually. Abra hesitated for a moment and said. Just now, we found a very strange place in the forest. A strange place. Fried was startled, and his expression became even more puzzled. What kind of strange place? We don't know how to describe it. Bikesro scratched his head and could only say so. So, Laxus and Kildas went there to take a look. Is that so? Fried nodded his head in understanding. He raised his eyes and looked at the forest before him. I hope nothing strange happens again. At the same time, Laxus and Kildas were standing in an open space deep in the forest, and their expressions were heavy. Upon closer inspection, the scene in front of Laxus and Kildas was more or less creepy. The ground was burnt yellow. The trees were withered. The fallen leaves seemed to have been burned to ashes by fire, and as soon as the wind blew, they immediately scattered. The air was filled with an extremely uncomfortable aura, and it made the space look slightly dim. It was quite strange. Such a creepy and extremely uncomfortable place made Lax's and Kilda's expressions become extremely heavy. Kilda's even made an assertion. This is not a natural scene, but a man-made one. Lax's nodded and said in a deep voice. Although I don't feel the aura of mana, the mana on Heavenly Wolf Island is in disorder. It is clearly caused by some mysterious power. In fact, in this world where mana prevailed, there were many strange places like this. Usually, they were caused by mana, and would not be treated so seriously by people like Laxas and Kildas. However, it was precisely because Laxas and Kildas were not ordinary people that they could feel the abnormality here. Normal mana would not be able to cause this abnormality. What the hell is going on? In another corner of the forest on Heavenly Wolf Island, Noah, who was heading towards Mavis Mausoleum, suddenly stopped and turned his head, looking into the distance. "Big brother Noah?" Wendy asked in confusion. "What's wrong?" Noah did not reply. He only looked in that direction, and there was a slight fluctuation in his eyes. The uneasiness that he felt not long ago rose in Noah's heart again. Noah did not know. In the direction that he was looking, a young man with short black hair, gray eyes, and black clothes with a long white cloth tied around his body walked slowly in the forest. His eyes were extremely dim, and there was no sign of life. After an unknown period of time, the young man who was walking slowly murmured, "When will I be able to die as I wish?" Chapter 11:28. Just as Celestial Wolf Island began to undergo some changes due to a small anomaly, a magic airship was slowly traveling in the sky far away from Celestial Wolf Island. If Noah were here, he would definitely recognize this magic airship. Because not long ago, this magic airship had openly barged in front of Noah and even almost barged into Magnolia. Inside such a magic airship, there was a vast hall. In the hall, 7 people were lined up in a row, facing forward. There was a throne there. A person sat on the throne. He was an old man wearing pitch-black armor with an eye patch over his right eye. His face and eyes were extremely fierce. Surprisingly, it was the guild leader of the strongest dark guild in the Baram Alliance, Grimoire Heart, Hades. As for the 7 people standing in a row in front of Hades, they were the 7 members of the Grimoire Heart, a group that no one in the underworld didn't know about. He had a head of disheveled golden hair, and his eyes were red, but they seemed to be made up of circles Zancalo. He looked like a goat and held a book in his hand Caprico. He wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and combed his hair back. It was easy to see that he was a young man who paid attention to his appearance. Lucyros. He was a fat man with a fat body, a double chin, and thick eyebrows. Cane. He had a short appearance and wore a wing-shaped earpiece next to his ear melty. He was dressed like a minority, and his skin was slightly dark Azuma. There was also a coquettish girl with waist-length black hair that was slightly purplish. A white hair clip was tied in between her hair, and she wore tight clothes that completely displayed her near-perfect figure. Urudia. They were known as the 7 families of purgatory, and were personally trained by Hades. Each of them was a 7 magic shooter. At this time, they all appeared in the hall of this magic airship. Leader Hades. The first to speak was Urudia. Eurulia raised the crystal ball in her hand above her head and said this sentence in a somewhat overjoyed manner. "We found Jerf." "Oh." Hades immediately reacted. He straightened his body and stared at Urudia. "You really found it?" "Yes." Eurulia smiled sweetly. "Just now, we did indeed capture Jerf's aura. That pure darkness is a power that no one other than Jerf can possess." "Really?" Hades's hand, which was resting on the throne, tightened little by little. A fierce light flashed through his eyes. "Finally found it, Jerf." It wasn't just Hades. Many of the Grimoire Heart sorcerers present, including Urudia, appeared to be rather happy. "We finally found him." Zancro laughed maniacally. "The world of great magic that we've been looking forward to can finally be realized." "Do you think it's that easy?" Caprico closed the book in his hand and said without changing his expression. "Even if we find Jerf, we have to make him acknowledge our ideals and change this world." "Change the world?" Lysiros pushed his glasses up slightly. He put one hand in front of him and the other hand in front of him as if he was performing a musical. What beautiful words. I. Cain was trembling all over. His fat body even began to sweat. I think so too, Melty interrupted Cain's speech and said expressionlessly. That's what Cain wants to say. It doesn't matter to me. Azuma's resolute face was expressionless, but his eyes were bright. As long as there's someone powerful who can satisfy me, that's enough. It's precisely because this world is full of useless weaklings that we need Jerf. We need the world of great magic, Urudia said with pursed lips. Only a world with sorcerers who can use magic and no ordinary people who don't have power can give birth to someone powerful who can satisfy you, right? Most importantly, in the world of great magic, there's the demonic abyss that we're searching for. Hades narrowed his eyes. That's our goal. Hearing this, everyone nodded one after another. But, President Hades, Urudia suddenly changed the topic. As far as we know, Jerf's current location seems to be a little special. It would be strange if the location of the most vicious black sorcerer in history wasn't special. Hades wasn't surprised at all. Where is Jerf now? It's also a special place for the president, Eurelia said calmly. Jerf's current location is the Holy Land of Fairy Tale, Celestial Wolf Island. Celestial Wolf Island. Hades raised his eyes slightly. I see. It's indeed a very special place. I've heard that Fairy Tale is currently conducting the S-rank magic shooter advancement test on Heavenly Wolf Island. All the elites of the guild are gathered on the island. Urudia's voice suddenly lowered, and her eyes became gloomy. That person is there as well. Hearing this, the atmosphere in the hull of the airship became heavy. Everyone present knew who the person Urudia was talking about was. Not long ago, that person fought to a draw with Hades, whom the 7 families of purgatory worshipped as a god. Even Hades couldn't do anything to that person. When this matter was first known, almost no one here was willing to believe it. But after Hades himself tacitly acknowledged this matter, the 7 families of purgatory fell silent. In particular, Urudia, who had personally witnessed the entire process of the earth-shattering battle between Noah and Hades, developed some reverence and fear for that person. That brat is also on Celestial Wolf Island. Hades's face was cold. Well, it's about time for me to get sick of watching Fairy Tale. A guild that doesn't even understand that the essence of magic is darkness, and still yearns for the complete opposite of light. Let's just let it become history together with that little brat. The moment he finished speaking, an extremely astonishing and sinister magic power continuously rose from Hades' body. Feeling that frightening magic power, the arch-shooters of the 7 families of purgatory all held their breaths. Then, they all reacted differently. A arch-shooter that even guild leader Hades can't do anything to. Zankalo clenched his fist, and traces of pitch-black flames flitted across it. I don't believe that kind of thing. Noah Dole. Azuma's eyes burned with a raging fighting spirit. I really hope to fight him. The others also had their own thoughts. Most of them were arrogant and unruly, and wanted to defeat Noah and prove their strength. Only Murdy lowered her head and remained silent. Cheer up, Murdy. Urudia glanced at Murdy and sighed. You're our trump card to deal with that person. Only you can truly kill him, so don't forget your mission. Murdy's gaze fluctuated slightly, but soon returned to normal and spat out a sentence. I'll kill him, bang. Accompanied by a heavy muffled sound, a huge magic beast flew out like a kite with a broken string. After heavily smashing into a cliff, its head tilted and it fainted. Phew, Noah breathed a sigh of relief, withdrew his fist, and laughed bitterly. This forest is still the same as before. There are magic beasts everywhere. Forget it, compared to the other teams that don't know their destination, we're already considered lucky. Hearing this, Wendy looked straight at Noah and did not look away. Noah asked doubtfully, "What's wrong?" "That." Wendy hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Noah, is there something on your mind?" Chapter 11:29. Wendy's words caused Noah to be slightly stunned at first. Then, he smiled slightly. "Is it that obvious?" Wendy nodded, her eyes never leaving Noah. Wendy was obviously very concerned about Noah's abnormality. In fact, from the beginning to the end, Noah did not do anything different from before, or acted differently from before. Generally speaking, it was impossible to tell if Noah had something on his mind just by looking at him. However, Wendy was able to tell. The same thing had happened to Mira and Lisanna. No matter how normal Noah acted, as long as Noah had something on his mind, his two delicate fiancées would be able to detect it immediately. According to Lisanna, this was the privilege of being his wife. There was no woman who would not be able to detect the abnormality of the man who shared a bed with her all day. Otherwise, why would most men who cheated on their wives be exposed in the end? This was the reason. This was what Lisanna said. Mira smiled but did not say anything. She had never explained why she could tell that Noah had something on his mind so easily. However, Noah knew that this was probably a little telepathic connection between a man and a woman who were in love with each other. In layman's terms, this was probably the so-called sixth sense of a woman. Wendy was able to detect Noah's abnormality probably because of her intuition as well. At least, that was what Noah thought. "Brother Noah, is there something bothering you?" Wendy carefully expressed her thoughts. "Can I help Brother Noah?" In other words, she wanted Noah to have a chat with Wendy. "There's nothing to hide." Noah pondered for a moment before he sighed. "Actually, I've been feeling a little uneasy since the beginning." "Restless?" Wendy blinked her eyes. Her expression was more or less a little confused. "What do you mean by that?" "It would be great if I knew." Noah patted Wendy's head and looked up at the sky. "It's just that I feel that something big is about to happen here." "Something big?" Wendy's expression was still confused, but she still spoke gently. "Maybe Brother Noah is just overthinking it." "I'd rather be the one overthinking it." Noah shook his head. "But I have a feeling that something big is going to happen here this time." This time, Wendy did not know what to say. Seeing Wendy's clumsy look of wanting to comfort Noah and make him feel better but not knowing what to say, Noah couldn't help but smile and pat Wendy's little head. "All right, maybe I'm overthinking it. Don't look so pitiful. People who don't know better might think that I don't want you." "Brother Noah." "Brother Noah would never do that," Wendy said. However, despite saying that, Wendy couldn't help but hold Noah's hand tightly. Tears began to accumulate in her adorable eyes as though she was a calf that was about to be sold in the market. It was really pitiful to see her like that. Such a cute appearance made Noah unable to help but pinch Wendy's cheeks lightly. His doting feelings were clearly displayed. "I'm just joking. Why are you so nervous?" "I'm not nervous," Wendy weakly retorted. Seeing this, Noah shook his head with a smile. He let Wendy hold his hand and said, "All right, let's go." "All right, let's keep going. Otherwise, she'll definitely arrive before us." Lisanna had once followed Noah to Celestial Wolf Island. At that time, Noah and Lisanna had found Mavis Mausoleum under the guidance of the first president. Now, although 2 years had passed, Lisanna should not have forgotten the location of Mavis Mausoleum. If he didn't hurry over, that little girl would definitely be impatient and arrive before Noah. Then, she would use this opportunity to tease Noah. As for the others, they would not even know the location of Mavis Mausoleum. They would probably spend quite a bit of time wandering around Celestial Wolf Island, and might even be eliminated when the time limit was up. Thus, in this segment, Noah and Lisanna, who knew the location of Mavis Mausoleum, had a huge advantage that the others did not have. 6 hours was enough for Noah and Lisanna to arrive at the location of Mavis Mausoleum. Immediately, under Noah's lead, Wendy slowly moved towards the Celestial Wolf Tree at the center of Celestial Wolf Island. It was a pity that Noah and Wendy's journey did not last long. Roughly 20 minutes later, when Noah cleanly dealt with another batch of magical beasts that had suddenly jumped out, a strange feeling appeared in the range of Noah's sensory ability. What kind of feeling was that? Noah could not explain it clearly. Noah only knew that when that feeling appeared in the range of his sensory ability, his body abruptly started to heat up, and his limbs started to involuntarily surge with power. Sensing this feeling, Noah's heart suddenly trembled. That was because this feeling was not unfamiliar to Noah. It was the premonition of the God-Slayer's body entering a state of battle when encountering a god. Sensing this, Noah's heart suddenly trembled, and his footsteps immediately came to a halt. Wendy, who was happily holding Noah's hand, also stopped, a question mark appearing in her head. Big brother Noah. Noah did not have the spare energy to pay attention to Wendy, and instead, turned his head abruptly, and spoke in a deep voice towards the direction of the nearby thicket. Who's there? Come out. As soon as his voice fell, the entire space was filled with an indescribable silence. Wendy sensed that the atmosphere was not right, and slightly hid behind Noah. Noah subconsciously protected Wendy behind him, and his gaze was fixed on the thicket in front of him. In the next second, a figure approached from afar, and with extremely clear footsteps and the sound of friction, slowly walked out of the thicket. It was a youth. He looked to be in his teens, and was quite young. Like Noah, he had a head of pure black short hair, and his entire appearance gave off a harmless feeling. However, it was precisely this harmless-looking youth that made Noah's body slightly tense. Because, the feeling that made Noah feel as if he had met a god, and his body automatically entered battle mode, came from the youth in front of him. If that feeling was a little stronger, then Noah's body would definitely enter battle mode in an instant. At that time, Noah could basically be sure that he had met the god that the God-Slayer was destined to kill. However, although the youth in front of him made Noah's body instinctively feel as if he had met a god, Noah could be sure that he was definitely not a god. The reason was also stated, that feeling was too weak, and could only barely make Noah's body instinctively react, and was far from being able to enter battle mode. But even so, it was enough to make Noah pay attention. Even if the other party was not a real god, but to be able to make Noah's body react as if he had met a god, it was enough to prove that the other party was not simple. Under such circumstances, Noah stared at the youth and spoke indifferently. Who are you? The young man didn't say anything. Just like Noah, who was staring at him closely, he stared at Noah and opened his mouth. And who are you? Why do I feel that you are extremely dangerous? If those who knew the youth's true identity were to hear what he was saying to Noah, they would definitely be very shocked. Unfortunately, Noah was not clear about the youth's identity, and only knew that he was definitely not someone he knew. Answer my question first. Noah's tone began to carry some hostility. Why are you, who is not a member of our guild, in our guild's sacred land? Hearing this, the youth fell silent. I see. The youth's face was somewhat melancholy. Is this island managed by someone? Hearing this, Noah's brows furrowed deeply. Could it be that this person did not come specifically for Celestial Wolf Island, and had accidentally entered? Just as Noah had such a thought, the youth's face suddenly changed, and he fiercely covered his head. A terrifying aura suddenly rose from his body. Chapter 1130. Og. The young man who suddenly appeared in front of Noah and Wendy bent down without any warning. His whole face became quite distorted, and he was sweating profusely. He seemed to be in extreme pain. No. No. The young man held his head like this, as if he was suppressing something. He groaned in pain and grief. Wait. I'll leave now. I'll leave now. Don't come out at this time. Please don't come out at this time. However, as the young man's pained and sorrowful voice echoed in the surroundings, something that seemed to be hidden in the young man's body seemed to ignore his will and crazily poured out, causing a terrifying aura to surge from the young man's body. Feeling the sudden surge of terrifying aura from the young man's body, Noah's pupils shrank, and in the next moment, his heart suddenly trembled. Oh no! Without any hesitation, Noah turned around and hugged the bewildered Wendy. Oh! At the same time, as if he was suppressing something in his body, the young man, who was holding his head with a face full of pain, suddenly let out a loud cry. Whing! Along with a strange trembling sound, a fog-like darkness surged out from the body of the youth who was screaming in pain. It was like the purest darkness, containing an extremely dense wave of death, a darkness that was so terrifying that it made people despair. The dense darkness, like a fog, surged crazily with the young man's body as the center. Then, like a pitch-black airflow, it revolved around the young man's body, and gradually formed a pitch-black protective shield. Ah! In the pure darkness, the young man screamed in pain, and his pair of extremely dim eyes suddenly turned into a strange red color. Immediately after, the dense darkness that constantly revolved around the young man's body suddenly exploded like a violent impact. Dong! In the blink of an eye, the terrifying darkness turned into a violent gust of wind that covered the entire surrounding space. At this moment, Noah just turned around and hugged Wendy in his arms. In other words, the whole change happened in less than a second. Thus, in order to protect Wendy, Noah's body was also covered by the thick darkness. Noah only had time to hug Wendy before everything in front of him turned into darkness, depriving Noah of his entire vision. At this moment, Noah felt as if his entire body had sunk into a bottomless swamp. Not only did his body become heavier bit by bit, but he also felt that the surrounding space had become extremely viscous, which was very uncomfortable. Then, a strange phenomenon occurred. Buzz! In Noah's heart, the outline of the stone plate that was connected to the 10 pattern suddenly trembled and emitted a shocking light. Naturally, only Noah was able to detect this phenomenon. It was precisely because he noticed this phenomenon that Noah's heart suddenly tightened. He finally understood something. Immediately, the violent storm-like dense darkness slowly receded from the space and gradually dissipated. Noah only felt that his entire body that had become incomparably heavy suddenly became light again. In the surrounding space, the extremely uncomfortable stickiness also suddenly receded, and everything returned to its original state. Thus, Noah quickly opened his eyes. Everything that entered his eyes made Noah stunned for a moment. In the range of Noah's vision, the forest that was previously full of vitality directly turned into a land of death. Whether it was the flowers, grass, trees, wood, or even the air, all of them seemed to have been sucked out of life and all of them withered. What is this? Wendy, who was completely unable to react at all, opened her eyes subconsciously in Noah's arms. Similarly, she also saw the surrounding scene of death and was stunned for a moment. Only the young man who caused all of this seemed to be relieved of a heavy burden. He half knelt on the ground as if he had exhausted all his strength. While panting rapidly, he looked at Noah with an extremely incredulous expression. You didn't die. The young man couldn't help but be shocked. From the changes in the surroundings, it could be seen that the dense darkness that originated from the young man just now could suck out all of life and cause life to wither in an instant. And obviously, humans were also in the same category. An ordinary human, if deeply trapped in the dense darkness just now, would have all of his life force sucked out and become a dried corpse. Noah, on the other hand, was not affected in the slightest. How could the young man not be shocked? But Noah did not seem to be surprised at all. Holding Wendy, he stared at the young man who was looking at him with an incredulous expression and said word by word. "You have the curse of God on your body." Yes. This young man had the curse of God on his body. Therefore, even if the young man was not God, he could still make the God Slayer, Noah, as if he had encountered a god. However, it was quite weak. Therefore, when the dense darkness erupted, the authority in Noah's body that was called the God-slaying power reacted. The reason was this. And the young man's expression suddenly changed after hearing Noah's words. The way he looked at Noah also changed. So that's how it is. The young man stared at Noah, shocked and calm as he said this. "Do you have the same thing on your body?" After saying this, the young man seemed to deny his own statement and shook his head slightly. "No, that's not right. The thing that exists in your body is not a curse, but it is the same as the curse in my body, the power of God." Hearing this, Noah slowly clenched his fist. Noah was not surprised that a human had the curse of God on their body. Because, in the God-slayer world, Noah also encountered the same thing. What really made Noah feel incredulous was not the curse on the young man's body, but the fact that the curse came from God itself. What did this mean? It meant that in this world, there was also the existence of God. A human with the power of God. The young man muttered this sentence, and the way he looked at Noah changed again. If before, the young man's eyes were filled with disbelief and disbelief, then now, the young man's eyes were filled with pure joy. In fact, it could even be described as ecstatic. "That's right, this will work, this will work." The young man stood up shakily, and stretched out a hand in the direction of Noah. His hand was still trembling, and he slowly walked in the direction of Noah as if he was crying tears of joy. "If a human's power is unable to kill me who has the curse of God, then, with the power of God, you will definitely be able to kill me, you will definitely be able to. Seeing the young man crying tears of joy, Noah calmed down. Whether or not God existed in this world was no longer important. Anyway, it was not the first time Noah had seen God, and even killed God. Now, there was only one thing to be concerned about. "You, who are you?" This sentence caused the trembling young man to stop in his tracks, and his lips slowly opened. Just as the young man was about to say something, another accident happened. Boom! A huge flower of light suddenly exploded in the sky above Heavenly Wolf Island. It was so eye-catching that it would definitely attract the attention of everyone on Heavenly Wolf Island. Seeing this flower of light, Noah's expression finally changed. This was because that flower of light was the unique signal of the fairy tale. Once this signal appeared, it meant one thing. Enemy attack. Someone was about to attack Heavenly Wolf Island. Noah's ominous premonition came true. The young man raised his head and looked at the signal in the sky. Just as the young man raised his head, an impact exploded on the back of his head, causing him to groan and fall to the ground. Noah immediately stretched out his hand and grabbed the back of the young man's collar. Seeing Noah suddenly knock the young man unconscious, Wendy was completely at a loss. However, now was not the time to be concerned about this. At such an important moment, they could not allow an unidentified person who carried the curse of God to wander around Heavenly Wolf Island. Carrying the young man, Noah shouted at Wendy without turning his head. "Wendy! Let's go to the camp." Chapter 1131. Whoosh! In the vast and dense forest, there was a black shadow that ordinary people could not compare to. One could only faintly see a black line flashing through the forest at an extremely fast speed. It caused a faint sound of breaking through the air, reverberating throughout the entire space. The trees in the forest were quite dense. It could be said that even the furthest distance between two trees was only a short 2 to 3 meters. With the black shadow's speed, it could cover this 2 to 3 meter distance in the blink of an eye. Traversing through such a dense forest at such an astonishing speed. Then it would definitely knock into a tree trunk in an instant, right? However, it was as if the black shadow wanted to overturn this theory. Its body was like a stream of light. It was as if it had turned on a radar that had a comprehensive scan. It clearly knew the location of every tree. With extreme agility that even the spirit monkey could not match, it shuttled through the dense forest without any hesitation. During this period, the black shadow was not able to knock into a single tree. Moreover, it was carrying a petite and cute young girl in one hand, and a young boy in the other, but it was not affected at all. This degree of agility and dexterity was simply shocking. Who? Gradually, the speed of the black shadow was like a gust of wind, bringing along a whistling sound as it swept up layers of fallen leaves on the ground. Like an arrow released from a bow, it shot rapidly towards a certain direction in the forest. With such a speed, Wendy could not even open her eyes. She could only close her eyes tightly, her small hands tightly grabbing onto the clothes in front of Noah. Her entire delicate body was curled up in Noah's embrace, leaning all her weight on Noah's body, allowing Noah to carry her. With this speed, it would not take long for Noah to reach the camp of Fairy Tale on Heavenly Wolf Island, right? As long as there were no obstructions. Traversing through the dense forest, Noah's expression suddenly froze, and he abruptly halted his footsteps. Gee! The overly violent speed caused Noah's feet to rub against the ground as he suddenly came to a halt. He rubbed against the ground for a long distance, setting off a large amount of dust along the way. It was only after a while that he finally stopped. Whing! Almost at the same time, a series of tremors suddenly reverberated around Noah. It was the sound caused by the sudden appearance of fruit-like clusters of magic power in the air. Dazzling fruit-like clusters of mana appeared around Noah without any warning, completely surrounding him. Immediately after, those demonic energy light clusters suddenly blossomed with dazzling light. Bang! Accompanied by a neat roar, the magic power light clusters surrounding Noah suddenly exploded, setting off astonishing flames, setting off violent bursts of flames that spread in all directions like a wave of fire. Naturally, Noah, who was surrounded, was completely covered by it. The surrounding dense forest was also enveloped by the shocking explosion. In the blink of an eye, the corner of the dense forest turned into a sea of flames, causing the trees to burn. Even the ground was directly charred black in the shocking explosion. In such an explosion, except for Naz, the dragon slayer archmage who could even devour flames, basically no one could be unscathed, right? However, if one took a closer look, one would discover that at the center of the shocking explosion, a huge shield, which was like a city wall, was inlaid with flower petals like decorations in the middle, towering like an iron tower. In the next second, the huge shield slowly turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared into the sea of flames. Behind the shield, Noah carried Wendy, who had fainted due to the sudden impact, and lifted a young man in his hand. Then, he glared at the only tree that remained intact in the sea of flames ahead with a frighteningly cold gaze. Whing! In the next moment, a golden ripple fluctuated around Noah's body. Inside, an extremely luxurious spear suspended in the air, turning into a stream of light that blasted forward. Bang! The only intact tree in the sea of flames was shattered cleanly under the attack of the sharp spear. However, before that, a figure suddenly flashed out of the tree and retreated. After tapping the ground a few times with the tip of his foot, he stopped in a kneeling position. Have I been discovered? With such a sentence, the man who appeared from the tree raised his head, allowing a resolute face to enter Noah's vision. Sure enough, you're worthy of being the archmage valued by President Hades. I've tried my best to align my mana with the mana of the celestial Wolf Island, but in the end, I was still discovered the moment I launched the attack. What a keen sense. The words of the man who suddenly launched an attack on Noah did not conceal his admiration for Noah at all. However, that didn't matter to Noah at all. What really made Noah react was a name that appeared in the other party's words. Hades. Noah suddenly looked forward. The one who attacked the celestial Wolf Island is the Grimoire Heart. To be precise, it should be the vanguard of the Grimoire Heart. President Hades and the other officers have yet to arrive. The other party stood up and looked at Noah as he said so. Then, I am one of the officers of the Grimoire Heart, Azuma of the 7 families of purgatory. What's the purpose? Noah ignored Azuma's words and asked indifferently. What's the purpose of attacking the celestial Wolf Island? President Hades did indeed give 2 orders. Azuma did not hide anything, as if he was enjoying the confrontation with Noah, and said straightforwardly. One of them was to annihilate the fairy tale. The atmosphere in the sea of flames suddenly became oppressive. So that's how it is. Noah muttered as if he was talking to an invisible person. Just like how I've been thinking about how to get rid of the Grimoire Heart, you also want to get rid of the entire fairy tale, Hades. Azuma didn't know why, but when he heard Noah muttering to himself, he felt that something was wrong. However, Azuma ignored this anomaly. This was because at this moment, Azuma's heart was already burning with a fighting spirit that was more intense than any other emotion. President Hades and the other officers have yet to arrive at the celestial Wolf Island. Among the 7 families of purgatory, I am the only one who has arrived at the celestial Wolf Island. Azuma looked straight at Noah, his eyes fluctuating with excitement. I heard that even President Hades couldn't do anything to you. This strength really makes me a little excited. Please be sure to show it in front of me. Before he could finish his sentence, Azuma's face suddenly froze. This was because in Azuma's heart, a sense of crisis suddenly shook violently for no reason, causing Azuma's heart to suddenly tighten. Without any hesitation, Azuma disregarded his image and rolled to the side on the ground at this moment. Golden ripples flashed out around Azuma's previous position, and under a neat vibration sound, they crazily spilled out one after another noble artifacts. Azuma dodged in time and fiercely collided with each other in the air. Dong! The powerful precious artifacts collided with each other, causing the violent impact to shake apart the sea of fire. At the same time, it also set off a shocking fire, causing an explosion that was not inferior to the previous one. The explosion was like a wave, spreading in all directions. Although Azuma did not care about his image and rolled away, avoiding the almost fatal direct attack, he was also affected by the shockwave of the explosive flames. He was directly blown away and hit a burning tree at the side. The flames burned Azuma's back, causing a burst of smoke to float from Azuma's back. Goo-woo! Azuma suddenly let out a low groan. Chapter 1132. The intense pain from the burning flames on his back caused Azuma's face to distort slightly. Ah! The so-called 7 relatives of purgatory seemed to be very powerful, but in fact, they were still just humans. Therefore, under the burning of the flames, Azuma couldn't help but let out a low roar. Then, he clenched his teeth and used the force to bounce away from the burning tree. Annihilate the fairy tale. At this moment, a cold voice sounded. I'd like to see if you're qualified. As soon as the voice fell, a monstrous magic power suddenly swept out from the space, causing the flames in the forest that had turned into a sea of fire to suddenly become stagnant. While the magic power whistled like a gale, it swayed crazily. Such a terrifying amount of magic power was all gushing out from the body of a single person. Seeing that Noah was able to create such a scene just by using his magic power, Azuma's expression finally changed. Unfortunately, Noah did not give Azuma too much time to be shocked. Whing! Along with the sound of the vibration, golden ripples reverberated behind Noah, and a variety of noble artifacts such as swords, sabers, spears, halberds, and so on popped out from within, pointing directly at Azuma. Immediately, the various types of noble artifacts, such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on, were like laser beams, cutting through the space and shooting in Azuma's direction. Seeing that Noah did not even say a few words of courtesy and immediately attacked in a temperamental manner, a ruthless glint flashed across Azuma's eyes. With a furious roar, the demonic energy in his body surged out, gathering at Azuma's feet and transmitting to the ground. In the next moment, thick tree roots suddenly drilled out from the ground. They were like vines that blotted out the sky and covered the sun. They were also like pythons. With a spiral, they welcomed the treasured artifacts that covered the sky and covered the earth. Bang! The treasures turned into laser beams and landed directly on the thick roots that were spiraling toward them. They were like missiles that struck directly, igniting terrifying flames. The impact caused ripples to surge out violently, causing the ground to tremble and crack. The shockwave swept through the surroundings, causing Noah's robes to flutter as he carried the unconscious Wendy in his arms and another unconscious youth in his other hand. But compared to Noah, Azuma wasn't as confident. He staggered back 2 steps from the shockwave. This guy's strength is actually so terrifying. Azuma looked at Noah in astonishment, but then he showed an excited look because of the fighting spirit that surged in his heart. Very good. Sure enough, you have the strength that even President Hades can't deal with. The battle that I've been dreaming of has finally appeared. At that moment, Azuma licked his lips and stretched out a hand toward Noah's direction, rolling up a strong magical power. Yi Jin. A whirlwind suddenly formed around Azuma, rolling up pieces of leaves. Those leaves were like sharp swords, spiraling along with the whirlwind. Then, like arrows, they shot toward Noah's direction. Looking at the incoming barrage of leaves, Noah's eyes were filled with coldness from beginning to end. He suddenly stomped his feet on the ground, causing the magical power that surged around him to flow into the ground like water. Bang! Suddenly, in front of Noah, the ground suddenly exploded. A huge magical light beam that was dozens of feet in size burst out like a volcanic eruption, directly impacting the leaves that had turned into sharp arrows. Chi! Without any suspense, in that huge magical light beam, the leaves that contained a lot of magical power were suddenly annihilated and disappeared without a trace amidst the sound of burning. Ha! Azuma roared. He clenched his hand, which was surging with magic power, and slammed it into the ground, causing the ground to burst open, and thick tree roots drilled out of it. This time, the thick tree roots twisted together in mid-air, turning into a huge fist that was entirely made of wood. Withstanding the fierce wind and waves of fire, in the whistling sound of the wind, it directly blasted toward Noah's direction. The huge fist covered Noah's entire body, blocking the flames from the surrounding sea of fire and the sunlight from the horizon, causing Noah to be shrouded in a huge shadow. However, in the face of such a huge blow, Noah just raised a hand with a cold face. Behind Noah, one of the many golden ripples suddenly expanded dozens of times, and a huge sword that was not inferior to the huge fist that covered the sky popped out. It rushed out and collided with the huge wooden fist. Boom! All of a sudden, a terrifying impact swept through the sea of fire like a storm, causing the burning trees and the sea of fire to fall radially, and the ground to crack inch by inch. The huge wooden fist was not purely made of wood, and it also contained an amazing amount of magical power. Under such circumstances, the fist made entirely of wood was even harder than rocks or even steel. A single strike from it could probably shatter a small hill. However, under the direct attack of the huge sword, the huge wooden fist was simply like an ordinary piece of wood, and was smashed into pieces that scattered in the surroundings. Boom! The huge sword's momentum did not diminish as it blasted into Azuma's position, smashing the ground to pieces. Azuma, on the other hand, rushed directly towards Noah before that. Noah raised his head and looked at Azuma, who was rushing towards him with a fierce face, as if he did not see anything. He did not intend to dodge, nor did he intend to evade. He just cast his gaze towards Azuma, who was getting closer and closer, with an indifferent face. This attitude made Azuma's heart go wild with alarm. Whoosh! At this moment, a sharp sound of something breaking through the air rang out from behind Azuma. Hearing this sound, Azuma turned his head abruptly, and then his pupils suddenly shrank. A crimson spear shot out from a golden ripple that had appeared behind Azuma at some point in time. It tore through the air and shot towards Azuma. In addition to the bright color, the crimson spear did not have much momentum compared to the huge sword before. It was just like a bright red arrow, shooting towards Azuma. However, Azuma could feel it. On the crimson-red spear, a rather fatal power quietly overflowed from it. Azuma's intuition told him that spear could not be avoided. No. It should be said that he absolutely could not avoid it. Once he dodged, he would definitely be pierced through by the scarlet spear. As a result, Azuma's hands and feet became ice-cold in an instant. Of course, Azuma, whose hands and feet were ice-cold, did not lose his rationality and reaction. While his expression changed sharply, the magical power in his body also surged out in an overwhelming manner. Great Tree Arc. Amidst Azuma's violent roar, thick tree roots suddenly burst out from the ground around Azuma. With a twist, Azuma's entire body was covered in them. Chi! At the same time, the crimson spear swept over violently. It finally vibrated with a strong magical aura, and the tip of the spear also gathered an astonishing amount of magical power, causing the red airflow to condense on it like a vortex. Gobalg Spear. As the real name of the noble artifact echoed in the space, the spear that was surging with magical aura suddenly fell on the thick tree roots that were soaring into the sky, and then suddenly, it exploded. Boom! At this moment, the entire world began to tremble from the rumbling sound. In the sea of fire, a terrifying explosion swept out, bringing with it an extremely terrifying wave of fire and fire. It gradually expanded, covering most of the corner of the forest, and continued to expand. Chapter 1133. The terrifying waves of fire continued to surge like an earth-shattering wave in every corner of the forest. Amidst the waves of fire that permeated every corner of the forest, numerous trees were incinerated in the blink of an eye, turning into nothingness. The ground had also completely transformed into pitch-black scorched earth. Not even a slightly larger rock remained, having been annihilated by the astonishing explosion. At the center of such a terrifying explosion, a huge crater slowly appeared in the sea of flames, directly exposing the entire rock stratum. A lot of seawater even flowed out along the cracks in the ground. It was as if a hole had been punched through the entire island, making one's scalp numb. There was only a small area that was still intact. That was Noah, who was holding Wendy in his arms and carrying the mysterious boy in his other hand. As for the center of the huge crater, the thick roots that were twisted together like vines had long been charred black, and like scattered ashes, they peeled off little by little, exposing Azuma inside. However, although he was protected by the thick roots that contained powerful magic power and were as hard as rocks or even steel, Azuma still seemed to have been burned all over his body. With a stagger, his knees went soft, and he knelt on the ground. Cough cough, a few mouthfuls of saliva mixed with blood were violently coughed out by Azuma's coughing. The blood drained from Azuma's resolute face. His slightly tanned face turned incomparably pale, and his expression was incomparably weak. Even so, Azuma still stared closely at Noah, murmuring absent-mindedly. So strong, really too strong. Azuma was the same as Wally, the kind of battle maniac who liked to fight with the strong. Therefore, when the grimoire heart was preparing to go to war with the fairy tale, Azuma, who was the first to arrive at the Heavenly Wolf Island, first went to find Noah. This was because the entire upper echelon of the Grimoire Heart knew that this grandson of Makarov had a powerful strength that could compete with Hades. For the belligerent Azuma, this was definitely an opponent that he yearned for even in his dreams. However, only now did Azuma know that he had underestimated Noah's strength. From the beginning to the end, Noah had been carrying a young girl in his arms and a young boy in his hands. While protecting these two people, he didn't even move an inch. In a short span of less than a minute, Azuma, one of the 7 families of purgatory, had been defeated so cleanly. It must be known that Azuma was not an ordinary member of the Grimoire Heart, but one of the 7 strongest high mages in the entire Grimoire Heart, excluding the president and the vice president. If he was placed in a regular guild, Azuma would definitely be an S-rank high mage. Even in the fairy tale, Azuma's strength was enough to rival Alusha and Mira. Otherwise, he would not have been able to keep his life even after Noah released the true name of the Gibalg. Of course, being able to keep his life was also because the Gibalg was only a B+ rank noble phantasm. If Noah released the Excalibur, which was an A++ rank noble phantasm, Azuma would not even have a speck of dust left. But even so, the Gibalg was still an opposing noble phantasm. To be able to keep his life under the Gibalg of a B+ rank noble phantasm, it was enough to show Azuma's strength. If it was any other time, even if he was an opponent, Noah would frankly praise him. Unfortunately, Noah's heart was already filled with anger towards the high mage who repeatedly claimed to annihilate the Grimoire Heart of the fairy tale. Did you survive? At that moment, Noah suppressed the anger in his heart and asked Azuma in a cold voice. Very well, tell me, where is Hades now? As early as when Hades claimed to destroy the fairy tale, Noah had been thinking of ways to collect information about the Grimoire Heart. Now, under the leadership of Hades, the Grimoire Heart had come knocking on his door first. How could Noah bear this? So now, Noah only had one idea. They had to find Hades. Hearing Noah's cold voice, Azuma could clearly feel the hidden anger and murderous intent, which made him admire him. As the strongest dark guild among the 3 major dark guilds in the Baram Alliance, whether in the light world or the dark world, the Grimoire Heart was an existence feared. And as the president of the Grimoire Heart, Hades was the Grim Reaper in everyone's mind. Frankly speaking, even Azuma couldn't think of resisting Hades. Because of this, Azuma wanted to fight Noah, who had the same level of power as Hades. Now it seemed that Noah was not only on the same level as Azuma thought, but also on the same level as Hades. Noah simply wanted to kill Hades. So, how could Azuma not admire him? Just as Azuma was about to say something, he inadvertently glanced at the young man in Noah's hand. Looking at the unconscious young man in Noah's hand, Azuma was startled at first, then his eyes suddenly shrank to the size of a needle tip. At this moment, Azuma's line of sight was completely taken away by the young man in Noah's hand, and he could no longer look away. His face was also shaken like never before. After a long while, Azuma spat out word by word. Joseph. The name that came out of Azuma's mouth made Noah's eyes shrink as well. Jerf. Noah naturally wouldn't forget this name. Not only because this name was the name of the most evil dark mage in the history of the magic world, but also because the Tower of Paradise that made Alusha suffer for the first half of her life had a lot to do with this dark mage. Even Jalal's life was ruined because of Gerald. He even died without a burial place, buried in the sea with the Paradise Tower. And just now, Azuma had called the boy in Noah's hand the name of the greatest villain in human history. Thinking of the curse that belonged to God and the darkness that could suck out all life, Noah couldn't help but turn his gaze to the unconscious youth in his hand. He is Jerf. When Noah's attention was diverted, Azuma reacted. It seems that it's not time for me to die here. Azuma made a prompt decision. We have to bring back the news that Jeffrey is in the hands of Fairy Tale. Therefore, Azuma rushed towards a burning tree and crashed into it. The scorching flames once again burned Azuma's body. Ah! Azuma let out a low scream. You! Noah was completely stunned. Azuma, on the other hand, gritted his teeth desperately, endured the pain, and hugged the tree without caring about the burning flames. In the next second, Azuma's body suddenly melted into the tree and disappeared. This guy was actually willing to go to such an extent in order to escape from Noah's hands. At this moment, Noah finally reacted. He closed his eyes and extended his sensing ability. Unfortunately, Azuma's aura had already disappeared without a trace. Noah slowly opened his eyes and looked at the forest in front of him that had turned into a sea of fire. He then looked at the youth in his hand and fell silent. Jerf. The dark mage who had existed 400 years ago and was still causing various effects in this world. Was such an existence really the harmless-looking youth in his hand? Chapter 1134. At a corner of Celestial Wolf Island, in the camp of Fairy Tale, a group of magic shooters from Fairy Tale had gathered together. Not only were there magic shooters from Fairy Tale, but there were also a few people who were clearly not from Fairy Tale. They were tied up and thrown outside the camp, and there was another guild's emblem embroidered on their clothes. It was the guild emblem of Grimoire Heart. With Noah as the leader, the group of magic shooters from Fairy Tale were all gathered in the tent, either sitting or standing. The atmosphere was more or less heavy. This is what happened. Lebby pointed at the people who were tied up outside the tent and said to everyone present. When Julian and I were looking for the mausoleum of the first president, Mavis, we coincidentally encountered these members of Grimoire Heart. If it weren't for Alusha and Mira rushing over in time, I'm afraid that Julian and I would have been defeated. We also felt that something was wrong and rushed over. Alusha continued Lebby's words. Then, we found that Lebby and Julian were in a difficult battle, so we took action together and took down these people. Then, we found out from these people that they were the vanguard of Grimoire Heart. They were sent to Celestial Wolf Island to be the vanguard. Mira said worriedly. According to them, most of the Grimoire Heart's troops are on their way to Celestial Wolf Island. That's why Alusa and I sent a signal. This was the reason why the signal flare of an enemy attack appeared. After knowing the whole story, everyone looked at each other and could see the anger in each other's eyes. President Prekto. Makarov clenched his fist, his eyes full of anger. Do you really want to destroy Fairy Tale with your own hands that much? He is no longer the second president of Fairy Tale. Laxus hugged his arms and snorted coldly. Right now, he's just an enemy of our Fairy Tale, Hades of the Grimoire Heart. I don't care whether he is Hades or Prekto. Naz slammed the table and said angrily. He actually hindered our S-rank magic shooter advancement exam, I will not forgive him. The one who felt the most empathy for Naz's words was Kana. In the corner, Katrina gripped her arm tightly and gritted her teeth. She glanced at Kildas with anger, regret, and unwillingness in her eyes. Undoubtedly, I came to participate in this exam with great determination, Kana. Lucy hugged Kana gently, her face full of sorrow. Now is not the time to talk about this. Gray looked at Makarov and said. What should we do now? Retreat? Gray's words made everyone present react differently. Don't joke around. Naz objected with all his might. Since the enemy has come to our door, why should we retreat? Many people nodded and agreed with Naz's words. Obviously, many of the people present had the idea of simply having a showdown with the Grimoire Heart right here and now. This was the Fairy Tale. They were hot-blooded and would never allow others to bully them. However, there were also calm people. If we plan to fight, then we must consider the strength of our side. Alusha looked around at everyone. The opponent is the strongest dark guild in Bahram's alliance. Not only is their influence huge, but they also have a powerful enemy that we can't ignore. As the guild leader, Hades' strength is above our guild leader. According to Noah, there are also 7 extremely powerful magic shooters called the 7 families of purgatory. Kildas narrowed his eyes. Didn't you already fight with one of the dark guilds in Bahram's alliance, the 6 demon generals? Oration cease. Those 7 magic shooters are all comparable to those guys, aren't they? Not only that, in addition to guild leader Hades, in Grimoire Heart, there is also a vice guild leader whose strength is above the 7 families of purgatory. Mira shook her head. The enemy's strength is unprecedentedly strong. If we plan to fight, then we must be fully prepared. If there is no chance of victory, retreating here is not a bad idea. Hearing the words of Alusha, Mira, and Kildas, some of the calmer people nodded in agreement. But. Wendy nervously raised her hand and expressed her opinion. We also have Brother Noah and 4 S-rank magic shooters, Brother Naz, Brother Gray, and Brother Gadjaloo. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Well said. Wendy. Naz fiercely clenched his fists and shouted. We, Fairy Tale, will never lose to a guild like that. I believe so. This sentence made everyone's heart burn with a burning belief. That's right, the enemy was unprecedentedly strong. But how could Fairy Tale be weak? Not to mention that Makarov was one of the 10 most powerful magic shooters in the continent. Laxas and Kildas were also people who had the ability to become one of the 10 most powerful magic shooters. Even Alusha and Mira were not comparable to ordinary S-rank magic shooters. In addition to Noah, who had once forced Hades to retreat, and the rest of the frontline combatants like Naz and Gray, it could be simplified in one sentence, and that was what was there to be afraid of. In fact, this was also Noah's thought in his heart. Noah did not feel that Fairy Tale was weaker than the Grimoire Heart at all. Moreover, the current Noah was no longer comparable to the previous Noah. Even if the 1-month adaptation period for authority was not over, just the Godslayer's curse resistance was enough to make Hades suffer. Not to mention, Noah still had a treasure trove that carried thousands of treasures that were enough to attack a city. Ashtar, who had a contract with him, had a curse resistance that was above Noah's, and could cut off all magic and curses. Therefore, Noah also stared at Makarov, and his voice was strong and powerful. Grandfather. Let's fight. If it was said that Naz's words made everyone's heart burn with a burning belief, then Noah's words made everyone's belief turn into a flame of struggle. And of course, the flame in Makarov's heart was no less than anyone else's. If you want to make a move against Fairy Tale, then you have to be prepared to be annihilated. Makarov stood up, and like a glaring King Kong, his short body rose with a terrifying aura like that of a giant. The war has begun. Little brats. Therefore, the flame in everyone's heart seemed to have been poured with a bucket of oil, and it was unprecedentedly high. Noah glanced at the young man lying in the other tent, and then looked at the sky outside with a glint in his eyes. If you're here for Jerf, then let today be the last day for you to pursue the so-called abyss of demons, Hades. Suddenly, a more terrifying aura than Makarov's flashed across Noah's body. In the sky not far from Heavenly Wolf Island, a pitch-black magic airship flew over. In the hull of the airship, Hades, who was sitting on the throne, looked at Heavenly Wolf Island through the glass window, and a dark emotion appeared in his fierce eyes. Let's begin the battle between the fairy and the demon. Chapter 1135. Looking at the gradually approaching Heavenly Wolf Island, the archmages of the 7 families of purgatory in the magic airship hall of the Grimoire Heart revealed fanatical expressions. With Hades as the leader, everyone here had the same goal. Jerf. He was the most vicious and evil dark mage in the history of the magical world. Not only was he the ancestor of dark magic, but he also had a great impact on the current world. For example, the so-called demon race was a race created by the black mage Jerf. For the past 400 years, stories of the devil race harming the human world had been circulating on the continent almost all the time. It was obvious how much harm this race had caused to humans. It was precisely because Jerf created such a race that he became the most vicious and evil dark mage. However, this was exactly what some crazy people were pursuing. Just like how there were people who believed in the devil race and people who yearned for the devil race, there was no more suitable belief and pursuit than dark mage Jerf. Therefore, to the people of the grimoire heart, Jerf was a godlike existence. Now that the existence that they had been pursuing for so many years was right in front of them, everyone was excited. Even Hades was excited. The essence of magic is darkness. It was because I understood this that I became a resident of darkness. Hades clenched one of his hands tightly, and a pitch-black magic power surged out of his body. Since the essence of magic is darkness, then as the ancestor of darkness, Jerf is undoubtedly the true leader of the abyss of demons. He is the one who grasps the supreme truth. That's why we need Jerf. Urutia's emotions seemed to be a little agitated. Let Jerf become the king of the world and create a world where only magic exists. Only humans who have mastered magic can survive. Ordinary humans will never be able to exist in this world of magic. That's our goal. For this, we'll do everything we can. Hades glanced at Urutia below. Urutia, is the news that Azumar sent back accurate? Azuma won't make a mistake in this kind of matter. The expression in Urutia's eyes changed slightly. I'm afraid that Jerf has really fallen into the hands of Fairy Tail. Is that so? Hades looked in the direction of Heavenly Wolf Island expressionlessly. You've given me another reason to destroy all of you. Fairy Tail. The group of grimoire heart sorcerers also more or less revealed some cruel emotions. At this moment, Melody, who had been looking ahead in silence, was startled. She pointed to the front. What is that? Hearing Melty's words, everyone shifted their gaze to the serious island outside the glass window of the airship. Everyone's eyes, including Hades's, narrowed. In the air above the celestial Wolf Island, in front of the path that the magic airship was traveling on, there was an ark that was made of dazzling gold, and its wings were made of emerald gems. Then, various treasures, such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and other treasures, suddenly shot out from the golden ripples and turned into streams of light. Like bullets, they once again shrouded the direction of the magic airship. Oh no! Murdy cried out in alarm. Those strange weapons are flying over again. Humph. Hades's face was gloomy. Just as he was about to stand up, the situation outside suddenly changed. Just as the overwhelming noble artifacts were about to land on the magic airship, a sudden burst of violent magic power suddenly fell from the sky like an invisible shockwave. Under the inexplicable impact, the treasures seemed to be suppressed by something heavy. With a tremor, they all deviated from their trajectories and brushed against the bottom of the magic airship, landing in the air. Noah frowned slightly. Gravity. Gravity. Hades also discovered the source of the inexplicable impact. He seemed to have thought of something, and also seemed to have felt something as he spoke in a deep voice. Bruno, is that you? Just as his voice fell, an even heavier voice echoed from the depths of the hole. It's me. Following the sound of such a voice, a man slowly walked out from the depths of the hole. Seeing this man, the archmages of the 7 families of purgatory were all startled. Bruno. It's him. Not only Zanklo, Murdy, and the others, but even Eurelia could not hide her surprise. Only President Hades can suppress him. The vice president, who has always been forbidden from participating in the guild's activities because he's too dangerous, why is he here? Ignoring the shock of everyone present, the man named Bruno raised his eyes and stared at the golden ark suspended in midair. A trace of malice flashed in his eyes. "That person seems to be flying." A heavy pressure surged from Bruno's body. Chapter 1136. Noah, who was standing on the Vimanas, squinted his eyes as he looked at the magic airship that had been restored to its original state. It seems that it's useless to simply destroy the airship. Saying this, Noah wanted to do something, but a strange phenomenon suddenly occurred again. Whing. The heavy pressure that caused Noah's noble phantasm to deviate from its path suddenly appeared again. Once again, it descended from the sky without any warning, abruptly landing on the entire Vimanas. Dong! As if there was an invisible mountain directly pressing down, the Vimanas that was suspended in midair suddenly shook under the extreme pressure of gravity. Its balance was directly broken, and it began to sway and fall to the ground. Even Noah couldn't help but feel the unprecedented pressure on his body, causing his entire body to become extremely heavy. Magic that controls gravity. Noah couldn't help but be speechless. Is it one of the so-called 7 families of purgatory? Or is it that mysterious vice president? Or is it Hades himself? Saying this, under the extreme gravity, Noah's body slowly emitted a ray of light. No. To be more precise, it should be said that a ray of light slowly emitted from Noah's back. Within the ray of light, a very delicate pair of wings that seemed to be made of pure blue light flashed on his back. Impressively, it was the White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing. In the next moment, the delicate light wings spread open, and the entire surface of the wings flashed with a faint blue light. Divide, divine. When this voice reverberated from the White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing, an invisible wave rippled out from the surface of the wings. Wherever the ripple-like wave passed, the gravity that was like a heavy mountain pressing down on the golden ark suddenly trembled, and at an extremely fast speed, it suddenly weakened by half. What? In the magic airship, Bruno, whose body was surging with heavy magic, was slightly surprised. However, at this time, a second voice sounded. Divide, divine. The invisible wave suddenly increased by more than 1-fold, causing the gravity acting on the golden ark to seem to be suppressed, and once again weakened by half. Divide, divine. And when another voice sounded from the White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing, the gravity acting on the Vimanas was once again fiercely swallowed by half, leaving only a small portion that was unspeakably weak, allowing the Vimanas to once again regain its balance. The White Dragon Emperor's light wings, divine dividing, that was created with weapon refinement magic, had a huge restriction. Not only could only be used 5 times, it could only be used once every 10 seconds. However, it was already enough to deal with this kind of situation. Thus, under the weakened gravity, Vimanas, who had regained its balance, directly ignored that part of gravity. With a sudden jolt, it suddenly burst into the air, and with an extremely fast speed, it soared into the sky, and after drawing a perfect arc, it landed back on the ground. The group of Grimoire Heart magic shooters did not even have time to react, as the Vimanas that had drawn a perfect arc fell from the sky, and heavily crashed into the pitch-black magic airship. Bang! In the dull sound of the collision, the pitch-black magic airship was fiercely hit by the golden arc, and with the undiminished momentum of the Vimanas, it fell in the direction of the celestial Wolf Island like a meteorite. Dong! Suddenly, the golden arc and the pitch-black magic airship heavily crashed onto the beach at the edge of the celestial Wolf Island at the same time, raising an astonishing amount of sand and dust that enveloped the entire space, like a sandstorm that expanded outwards. However, if someone were to observe carefully, they would definitely be able to discover it. Just as the magic airship was about to hit the ground, the golden arc suddenly disappeared. Although the pitch-black magic airship did not avoid the fate of directly hitting the ground, before that, a few figures suddenly flashed out of the magic airship, and flashed in all directions. Thus, the magic airship that really hit the ground was the Grimoire Hearth magic airship, and the magic artifact called Vimanas had disappeared without a trace before that. As for the Grimoire Hearth magic airship, even if it fell to the ground, it still did not cause any injuries to the Grimoire Hearth magic airship. With Hades as the leader, the group of Grimoire Hearth magic shooters all flew out of the magic airship that had fallen, and landed on the ground. Hades, who was standing at the head of the group, had a sullen expression on his face. He raised his eyes and looked straight ahead. There, a figure had already appeared there without anyone noticing. Looking at the figure, Hades straightened his body and spoke in a deep voice. "I haven't seen you for a few months, kid, your skills have improved." "You haven't improved at all, is it because you're old?" Facing Hades' gloomy gaze, Noah said indifferently. "Since you're already at the age of entering a coffin, you should have obediently let someone build a grave for you, instead of coming out to be a hindrance to us kids. How much do you not want to die?" Noah's unceremonious and ruthless words made Hades' face even gloomier, and also made the group of Grimoire Hearth magic shooters tremble in fear. This was the first time they had seen someone who dared to speak to Hades in such a tone. Yet, the other party had the qualifications to make Hades speechless. "It seems that you've improved not only in your ability, but also in your ability to talk." Hades' face showed a ruthless expression. "I wonder if you'll still be so eloquent when the demons have hunted all the fairies." "Wait until the demons have hunted all the fairies." Noah looked at Hades sarcastically. "You've really gotten old, can't you see the situation clearly? Then let me make you see the reality." After saying that, Noah raised a hand. At the same time, in the forest by the beach, a series of footsteps slowly sounded. The group of Grimoire Hearth magic shooters turned their gazes in the direction of the forest, and then focused their gazes in unison. In the forest, with Makarov at the head, the magic shooters belonging to Fairy Tale all walked out, each of them with a cold expression on their faces. Seeing this scene, Hades narrowed his eyes. "Makarov. Precto. No. Hades." Makarov took a step forward, his short body exploding with a terrifying aura as he stared at Hades. "It's time to decide the victor." Following Makarov's words, Laxus at the side threw out a person in his hand, letting him roll in front of Hades. With Hades at the head, the group of Grimoire Hearth magic shooters all lowered their heads and looked at the person who was rolling in front of them. When they saw the person's full appearance clearly, their pupils suddenly shrank. It was actually Azuma who had arrived at Celestial Wolf Island first. However, at this time, not only did Azuma's body have the injuries from the battle with Noah, but there were also traces of electricity. "Sorry, this guy was sneaking around the Celestial Wolf tree, so I was a little heavy-handed." Laxus curled his lips at the demons whose expressions were changing. "I didn't cause you any trouble, did I? You think you can hunt the fairies by doing something to the Celestial Wolf tree?" Noah laughed coldly. "Unfortunately, you are the prey, demons." Chapter 1137. When he first met Azuma, Azuma had told him that the grimoire heart that attacked the Celestial Wolf Island was only the vanguard. Hades and the other 7 family members had yet to arrive at the Celestial Wolf Island. However, why was it that Azuma, one of the 7 family members of the Purgatory and also a member of the Corps, had arrived at the Celestial Wolf Island before the rest of the Corps members? At that time, Noah, who was filled with anger, did not think too much about this question. When he returned to the fairy tale camp and completely calmed down, he faintly sensed that something was wrong. Noah could be considered to have some understanding of the Celestial Wolf Island. When the Celestial Wolf Island was mentioned, he would definitely think of 3 special places. The first was the barrier that enveloped the entire Celestial Wolf Island. This barrier could render all probing magic ineffective, making it impossible for anyone to use magic to find the celestial wolf island. Only Fairy Tale, who knew how to get to the celestial wolf island, knew the location of the celestial wolf island. The second was the mausoleum of the first guild leader, Mavis. In terms of form, the importance of this mausoleum to Fairy Tale was beyond doubt. And in terms of substance, Mavis' mausoleum sealed the 3 great spells of the Fairy Tale. It was impossible to say that it was not special. As for the last one, it was the celestial wolf tree. That wasn't just a tree. Thinking back, when Noah first came to the celestial wolf island, he faintly sensed the uniqueness of the celestial wolf tree. This tree possessed inconceivable power. It could provide a certain degree of protection and buff to magic shooters with the guild emblem of Fairy Tale. Not only could it increase the magic power of magic shooters, but it could also guarantee that magic shooters with Fairy Tale would not receive fatal damage within the range of Sirius Island. It could be said that as long as the celestial wolf tree was present, it would be difficult for high mages of Fairy Tale to die on the celestial wolf island. As the former president of Fairy Tale, it was impossible for Hades to not know about this matter. Since the Grimoire Heart led by Hades wanted to attack the celestial wolf island and annihilate the Fairy Tale, it was impossible for them not to think of a way to solve the problem of the celestial wolf tree first. You sent this guy to Celestial Wolf Island in advance so that he could destroy the Celestial Wolf Tree and make Fairy Tale lose the protection of the Celestial Wolf Tree, right? Noah glanced at the gloomy Hades, his face full of sarcasm. Unfortunately, your calculations were very good, but you neglected the fact that this fellow seems to be a battle maniac. The moment he arrived at Heavenly Wolf Island, this fellow impatiently ran over to challenge me. In the end, he exposed his whereabouts, which made me recall the problem of the Heavenly Wolf Tree. Then, just in case, I went up to the Sirius tree to wait for a while. Then, this guy really jumped out. Raxus raised one of his hands. There were some sparks of electricity on his hand. He's a good opponent, but he was seriously injured by Noah first. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so easy to take him down and still have to worry about the Celestial Wolf Tree. Hearing Noah and Lax's words, the high mages of Grimoire Heart finally understood the current situation. Demons hunting fairies. That was indeed not right. The situation had been reversed. The fairies, who were supposed to be the prey, had the initiative in their hands and had completely turned the tables. However, turning the tables did not mean that they could definitely become the hunters. Even if the fairies were no longer the prey, the demons would not believe that they would become the prey and be at the mercy of others. You're quite capable, Makarov. You've indeed nurtured some good seedlings. Hades glanced at the entire Fairy Tale. However, you don't think that you can defeat us like this, do you? Hearing this, the group of Grimoire Heart's magic shooters also erupted with powerful auras. The crystal ball in Urudia's hand blossomed with light. Thick black flames ignited on Zanclo's body. Caprico, Lysiros, Cain, Murti, and the rest of the high mages of the 7 families of Purgatory also erupted with astonishing magic power, causing the air to become heavy. In particular, Bruno's magic power surged from his body, causing the surrounding sand and dust to seem as though they had turned into iron particles. They poured onto the ground like a torrential downpour. Sensing the terror of the enemy, the group of Fairy Tale magic shooters also became solemn. Only Naz looked at Zanclo, whose entire body was burning with thick black flames. He clenched one of his hands into a fist and similarly erupted with a ball of scorching flames. Leave that black guy over there to me. None of you are allowed to make a move. Naz's words immediately dispelled the solemnity in everyone's hearts. In particular, Gray, who had been staring at Urudia, stepped forward and spoke in a deep voice. You're called Urudia. What? Do you find it familiar? A flirtatious smile appeared on Urudia's face, but for some reason, a hint of hatred suddenly appeared in her eyes. Do you still want to ask me why I look exactly like your magic teacher, that woman named you? Are you? You. Gray clenched his fists tightly. You really are related to you, are you? Urudia fell silent and only looked at Gray with eyes full of hatred. This made Gray grit his teeth and take a deep breath. Leave that Urudia to me. Seeing that Naz and Gray had both found their opponents, the rest of the fairy tale members also stared at the rest of the Grimoire Heart members as if they were looking at prey. That gaze naturally infuriated the group of magic shooters, who thought that they were the hunters, even though they were the Devil's Heart. What an irritating gaze. Zanclo's entire body was burning with black flames as he laughed insolently. Can you kill them all? Can you all fly? Bruno asked in a low voice as he stared at the people of Fairy Tale. Fairies have wings. What will it be like when they fly? I'm really looking forward to it. Sensing the anger and murderous aura surging from Bruno, Zanclo, and the rest, Hades waved his hand expressionlessly. Do as you like. Torture these fairies however you want. This sentence completely ignited the tense atmosphere of the entire scene. Torture the fairies. Makarov abruptly raised his head and roared furiously. Do you think you can do it? As soon as his voice fell, Makarov's entire body suddenly expanded, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a giant that blotted out the sky. Come and try the attack of the fairies that you want to torture. Demons. In the next second, a huge fist brought with it the whistling of the wind. With an astonishing momentum, it fiercely descended from the sky and blasted towards the Grimoire Heart. Boom! Amidst the roar, the entire ground trembled under the direct impact of that huge fist, and it stirred up the sand and dust that filled the entire space. However, before that happened, the group of Grimoire Heart magic shooters scattered one after another, including Hades. However, just as Hades was about to leap up, a figure rushed toward him. Immediately, Noah's pitch-black, deep eyes were imprinted into Hades's eyes, causing his expression to change. Whoosh! Amidst the whistling of the wind, a foot swept out and heavily kicked Hades' abdomen. Boom! With a muffled sound, Hades was sent flying in the direction of the forest. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.